All right, welcome in. Today I am going to be running a wonderful little run called Happy Couple. This is a pretty enjoyable little meme run from Hollow Knight. It unlocks one of the hidden achievements in the game, which is actually pretty difficult to get, but very, very rewarding if you do happen to get it. So I'll be explaining as we go along exactly what this achievement is and how we get there, but please note that as hinted at by the color of this category name, it is a wonderful little surprise here at the end. So yeah, the category I'm going to be running is done primarily with the no major glitches rule set, and I will be playing by that rule set throughout this entire run. Don't worry, in Hollow Knight, major glitches mostly mean completely game-breaking things, and what we'll be doing is still a handful of various fun little skips and tricks to save time. We simply won't be doing things like starting our game in the Godseeker mode and getting all abilities immediately. So the main goal of this category is to unlock a particular achievement, which is probably the cutest thing in the game, if you ask me, and I think it's adorable. To get there, we have to actually upgrade our nail, our main weapon here, to its maximum power, which means we need to go around the world and collect every single pale ore in the game. There are 6 of these, and they are located in some pretty terrible spots. Most probably painfully are the ones that are behind a boss called Nosk, who we will be fighting later in the run, and also at the end of Colosseum 2, which is a pretty difficult little combat challenge, which will be almost the very end of the run for us. In addition to that, we actually get to go and collect 31 grubs, which is probably the best part of this run, if you ask me. One of the pale ores is a reward for getting 31 out of the 46 total grubs in the game, and we will be doing that. So yeah, I've just kind of been blowing through most of the early game here. There's a couple of tricks. You may have seen one just there, where I actually opened my inventory to fall faster. These are called inventory drops, and basically the way that they work is the same frame that I step off of a ledge, I have to open my inventory. That uncaps my fall speed, which allows me to fall very quickly, but because it's frame perfect, physics frame perfect, not display frame perfect, but it's pretty hard to get consistently, so we go for a number of them, and if you see me randomly opening my inventory and failing to move, it probably means I'm missing one of those inventory drops. Other than that, most of this early game is pretty simple. We're pretty much just walking through crossroads here and heading on to what is typically the first boss of the game, which is the False Knight. Along the way, we're going to save our very first grub, so it's pretty good. This category, we get to grub saving right away. We don't waste any time, and our first grub comes before we even fight the first boss. Now, unlike most categories in Hollow Knight, we actually fight this first boss in this category, and the reason is that we actually need to get the item that he drops. So you get to see a fun little damage cycle here on this first boss, where I'm going to intentionally damage tank 1 time per cycle. Sometimes I'll get hit twice if I miss my cycle, but ideally we'll only get hit once. So I need full health as a safety, so I'll be healing after I get the first stagger here. If you're playing any percent or most categories of this game, this boss is actually skippable. You can go through only the first cycle here, and then open the gate that's over on the left-hand side of the arena. That allows you to walk out of the arena without actually killing the boss. It's used in most runs because you don't typically need to actually pick up the item here at the end of the fight. And there we go, we got the cycle, nice and done. You don't typically need the item here, but this will actually be our access into the City of Tears, which I'll be talking about a little bit more later. So yeah, that's the False Knight fight. It's a little bit easy when you're just damage tanking through it, but as I mentioned, if you're not careful, you can actually take a second hit of damage on each of those cycles. So if you're at not full HP and you tried this strat, you could find yourself dying here. But yeah, that item I picked up there is the City Crest, and we will be using it to enter the City of Tears in about 10 minutes from now. And then, yeah, so the next section here is a pretty simple section. We're going to go pick up our first major ability, which is Vengeful Spirit. It is kind of one of the most important abilities that we're going to pick up. It is a spell which we can use for combat purposes, and we will be making a lot of use out of this and its upgraded version later in the run. But it also helps us with some movement early on in the run, and we'll be showing that off a little bit in the next section. But yeah, this is that ability here, Vengeful Spirit. Like I said, pretty good for a first ability, but unfortunately when we pick it up, we get locked in this little tutorial for how to use Vengeful Spirit. It is called the Ancestral Mound, and it is home to the first RNG check of the game. So at the end of this arena is a Balder, and that Balder will spit a random amount of times before it gives you an extra enemy that you can hit. I'll show you exactly how it works, but on each spit there's a 50% chance to get what you need and a 50% chance to simply waste time. I'm also going to be setting up a trick called the Soul Catcher Early Control, which hopefully I will get. It's pretty difficult. And here are the spits. So what I needed was for... Sir, no. Okay, I can't do the Soul Catcher Early Control now, but that's fine. What I needed was for that second Balder to be spat out so I could actually collect enough soul to shoot an additional fireball. We got it on the second spit, but it wasn't quite cooperating in the way that I needed to set up the early control trick, so instead we just picked it up and had to sit through that text box. No big deal there. The rest of this section has the other half of this RNG check, which is another Balder of exactly the same kind. So we're going to be fighting that after we climb up here and out of Crossroads. So yeah, this section here, we're mostly just collecting enough soul to be able to shoot the fireballs that we need. These enemies take 4 fireballs to kill. At maximum power, we can only shoot 3. So we need to wait for the enemy to be spat out, there it is, to shoot the 4th. So you can see why this can be a bit RNG. 50-50 on each spit to get the Balder we need. There we got it on the 3rd try. Not the best luck, but not the worst. Fun story about those lads. I once, in a run that ended up being under a 10-minute run, managed to sit through 28 total spits between the two of them before finally getting the 2 Balders that I needed. That, as far as I know, is still the worst that anybody's had to deal with it, and it is, in fact, my proudest world record. Anyway, Greenpath is a pretty good little area to teach you about how painful Hollow Knight speedrunning really can be. So there are 2 main skips that we're going to use in Greenpath, and the first is coming up right here. And that is called a fireball skip. It may look a little bit easy, but trust me, it is not. What you have to do is turn around and shoot 2 fireballs without losing any height between them. And it can be a bit of a pain, especially for new runners, to try to learn how to do this. Luckily, you get 2 attempts, and by that I mean you have to do it twice. There's a second fireball skip, as you just saw. Both of these do have backups, but it's significantly faster to get the actual skips the first try, so I'm glad I was able to show it there. We don't use too many more fireball skips in the run. There is one other place where I'll be using the fact that fireball stops our momentum in this run, but it'll be pretty late in there. After this, we just continue through Greenpath pretty much normally. We're heading toward Hornet, but we will stop along the way to pick up 1 additional grub. Like I mentioned, we got to save 31 of these things, and this will be the second of them, which is, in my opinion, again, the best part of the run, but it is definitely painful at times considering some of the locations of these grubs. Getting to 31 is a pretty significant part of this run, and you will see quite a lot of time spent going and saving some of them. I do love grubs. They are probably the best part of this game and probably what kept me going for 100%, and I hope that you get to enjoy all their little happy cries as we save them. All right, so coming up here, to the left is Hornet, but we have to make a short detour. We're going to head down and open up one of these stags. This is the first stag that we're opening in the game. This is the game's fast travel system, and it will allow us to come back here much faster, much later in the run. We'll be opening several of these throughout the run, but this is the first and also one of the more important ones because we do need to use that stag to return here for a handful of reasons, but the most important is the very end of the run, where we will actually be going and visiting Sheo for reasons that will become apparent when we get there. Alright, so this is Hornet, also known as Jane Silksong. This is one of the first bosses in the game that typically gives people problems, and also is going to be the center of the sequel to this game, which will probably never come out. So anyway, she guards one of the most important abilities in the game, which is the Mothwing Cloak. That's what we just picked up. We are going to be using that pretty much constantly for the rest of the game. That is the dash ability. It lets us go fast. We like going fast, so we're going to use it immediately. Here you may notice me using a trick, which is aptly called quitting out. I save and quit to return to my last bench. All of my progress gets saved when I save and quit, so you can see I'm able to use the dash ability. But I actually return to where I last took a bench, which in this case is Ancestral Mound. We're going to be using this a lot throughout the run because there's a lot of times where we get to the end of where we want to be, and the fastest way back to the next place is going to be save and quitting. There are a few places where this can save significantly more time because Hollow Knight is typically timed loadless, and a lot of the time that a quit out takes is actually the loading time. But there are times where even if we're talking about RTA times, it's significantly faster to quit out, and Hornet is a good example of that. Alright, so we're continuing here through Fungal Waste. This is where we're going to find our next major ability, and probably the most consequential ability in terms of access in the game. It is the Mantis Claw ability. And this will allow us to climb up walls. This is a pretty straightforward segment here. We're just going to continue on down, but there's a couple of tricks that can be a little bit tricky here. The first is something that we call Explosion Pogo, and let me show it to you here. We stall there with 3 fireballs in a relatively specific setup to be able to pogo this sporg before it explodes and allows us to... Oh no, that's unfortunate. Allows us to get to this area. Oh, these are really not cooperating. The second piece there was called Mantis Pogo, but unfortunately I did miss that. That is actually the harder half of this segment, if you ask me, and it can be quite painful if it goes wrong. We just had to go around there, but it's not too big of a time loss. Okay, so at this point in most Hollow Knight runs, we actually would save and quit again to return back to Ancestral Mound. This is where Happy Couple starts to diverge from typical routing. We're actually going to continue up out of Mantis Claw and head up to the City of Tears. So this is why we needed to pick up the City Crest earlier, and I'll show you where it's used pretty shortly. But before we head there, I need to go and save another one of our little grubby friends. This one here is just up through these bouncy little mushrooms. By the way, these mushrooms, casually, they can be quite a nightmare to realize that you have to downstrike them. You have to pogo on them to be able to continue. When I played this game, I didn't realize that I could pogo at all, and this was quite painful. I was stuck here for probably hours and hours and hours. Anyway, we come through here to the City Gate, which is where we're going to use the City Crest. This is the typical progression that you'll go through in your casual playthrough, but it's far from the only progression that you could do. This is what the game sort of expects you to do, and this is one of the few speedruns that actually does come through here that isn't the full completion category is like 112%. So we're going to continue down through here into the City of Tears. This is the next major area, but one where we are going to pick up only a relatively minor ability in terms of access, but a pretty important ability in terms of combat. That is the Desolate Dive ability. It's gated behind probably the most RNG-heavy segment of the run, which is Soul Sanctum, and it is a very painful place to be. Before we go there, we will be actually taking advantage of a slight reroute that I only started implementing about a week ago. We're actually going to go out of our way here to pick up the first of the nail upgrades very early on. Like I said, we actually need to maximize all the nail upgrades, maximize our nail damage in this run. So I need to collect all 4 upgrades eventually. This is one of the few runs that actually can pick up Nail 1 early because we don't fight any enemies at all that scale with nail damage throughout the rest of the run. So actually it's pretty quick to hop on over here. This is about 30 seconds of time loss, but the amount of fights that we do with this nail upgrade make up for the actual lost time here. It also makes the end of the run significantly comfier. Otherwise we have to do everything, including the second Colosseum, on only nail 0, and with no nail upgrades it can be very, very tedious. So now that we have our nail upgrade, we're going to continue on into City and into Soul Sanctum. As I alluded to, it can be a little bit tricky to get through this area, and especially Soul Sanctum can be a bit painful, but we will head on in and hope for the best. Along the way, we're selling to this lovely little relic seller here. He goes by the name of Lem, and he is our primary source of geo in the early part of the game here. Lem will buy the relics that you pick up and give you pretty good prices for them. I'm not sure where Lem gets all his money. It seems like the only way to do it is to kill a bunch of enemies or go and be successful in the Colosseum. So either Lem is a murderer or a Colo champion, and honestly, I'm not sure which, but I like those odds. All right, let's head on down here. That was pretty smooth. It's easy to take a few hits of damage here. We're going to continue on here into Soul Sanctum. Once again, and pretty much all throughout this run, we are going to be saving grubs, and that is, again, one of the best parts of this run. I love this. This right here is a cute little grub just under the city. I believe that is grub number 4 for us. And we will be saving another 27 of them, friends, so don't even worry. Okay, so this is Soul Sanctum. This area is very, very RNG heavy. There are lots of enemies that spawn at completely random times and shoot you with these little balls of energy. Okay, got lucky there. They can spawn directly in front of you, blocking your path. They can be quite problematic. This here is the Soul Warrior. It is a mini-boss at the start of Soul Sanctum here. That was an okay fight. Not fantastic, but completely acceptable. And he blocks the second half of Soul Sanctum off from you. This is an area that if you're playing this game casually, you can get stuck in for quite a while. I know that it took me a long time to get through Soul Sanctum, mostly because of the boss at the very end, who we will be showing you. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Okay, we're just gonna pop on over here for a second, because these lads are spawning directly in front of me. This is what I mean when I say that Soul Sanctum can be very RNG heavy. You can see the nightmare that happens in this room. That is approximately the marathon luck right there, but it's fine. We go through it. We survive. Okay. Here I'm going to show a fun little trick, which is called the Soulmaster Early Control. I'm going to dunk myself in spikes here, which will actually allow me to start moving during the scream. It's a very minor bit of time save, just allows us to get a few extra hits in during the initial wind-up to the fight. This fight is the fight that walls a lot of people in their casual playthrough. There we go. But once you learn it, it's not too bad, and you can start to get through it pretty quickly. And there's the first phase of Soul Master. One benefit of having the first nail upgrade here is it really speeds this fight up, and it's a pretty RNG heavy fight as well, just to cap off the lovely Soul Sanctum there. So it's nice to have a little bit more consistency through the early nail upgrade here. In this phase, there's a handful of dives that happen there. As you saw in one of the early dives, he can actually fake you out and not do the dive at all. You have to be prepared to react to that. You can see we got a lot of damage in there, and he actually dies pretty quickly in this phase. All right, so that is the Desolate Dive pickup. This is, again, probably one of the more important combat abilities that we're going to use. We're actually going to get an upgrade for this ability very, very shortly. But the main thing that it does, and the main reason that it's in this run, is it gives us access to a lot of grubs. There's actually quite a handful of grubs that are in dive-locked locations, and in the context of Happy Couple especially, we also need to get access to the Crystal Heart ability, which is in Crystal Peak. That we either have to get Dive to enter or Lantern, and we choose to get Dive in this speedrun, partly because it gives us access to a number of grubs, like the one I just saved there. The trick that I used here is called Fake Dive, where I'm using a dive at the very edge of a dive floor. That allows me to not actually dive through the floor, but instead just open it and stay on top of it. We use that a couple of times to be able to save that grub more quickly. Otherwise, you kind of have to go around, and it's a little bit of time loss. All right, so now we're just going to leave Sanctum, and I believe we can all say good riddance, especially after what happened in that room just before Soul Master. So we are going to get on out of here and head into Crystal Peak. Crystal Peak is a relatively consistent area compared to what we just experienced. However, there are still a number of difficult tricks and especially cycles that I will be trying to show off here. So we'll see how it goes. Before we get out of there, we do have to climb up out of this room. This room can be a little bit painful because of things like that. Wow, that was quite the snipe. These enemies here are a little bit frustrating, but they tend not to be too bad. Whoops, sir. Thank you. They tend not to be too bad if you have the same movement through the room every time, unless they snipe you with their javelin, like happened to me there. Okay, so here's the second of the stags that we're unlocking. We are actually going to take it to a third location, which is the very start of the game. This stag is unlocked from the very beginning, and we use it to get back to Crossroads very quickly without having to open Crossroads stag. We're going to use this stag later, but this is the Dirtmouth stag, and you may recognize this as the very beginning of the game. We are going to head now to the right, where we're going to enter our next major area. This is a pretty fun little segment here. We're just going to save a ton of grubs. Actually, Crystal Peak is probably the most grub-dense area in the game. There are 7 total grubs in there, and again, we need 31, so we're actually going to save every single grub in Crystal Peak throughout this run. We'll only get 4 or 5 of them on the first pass, but we'll get the rest when we come back much later, because actually there's also a pale ore that can be found at the top of Crystal Peak. It will be the second to last pale ore that we get in this run, though, because it's much faster to do with Monarch Wings, which we'll be picking up in about 20 minutes here. All right, but this is the dive entrance to Crystal Peak, and as I mentioned earlier, you need one of 2 things to get in. You need dive or you need lantern. To the left of me there would have been the lantern entrance, which is what's used in any percent and a number of other speedruns. But here we're using dive, again, mostly because it allows us to save additional grubs. All right, we're going to be doing a trick here, going for a trick here called Pogaxe. Nice, beautiful. We got it first try. Okay, so that is a fun little trick where you pogo the axe that the miner throws. It can be a little inconsistent, but it's pretty fun when you get it, and it looks really cool. All right, continuing up through here, this is a really, really difficult room on latest patch. Whoop, already messing up the cycle, but that's fine. If you go through here on a perfect cycle, you can just barely beat the final crawlers in that room, but it can be pretty hard to hit, and we messed it up a little bit there. It's a little bit easier on earlier patches, but on the latest patch of the game, it can be pretty tough. Okay, so we're pretty much just blowing through Crystal Peak. We picked up one thing that you may have noticed there, which is the Shopkeeper's Key. We picked that up for one reason and one reason only, and that is to get the Elegant Key in a few minutes here. That guards the Shade Soul ability, which will be our main damage in the Colosseum. So we'll be picking that up and talking about that a little bit more as we go. Right there is another case where I'm using the Fireball to stall. Oops. I was trying to go through here without taking damage. Unfortunately, messed that cycle up. That's okay. So I have to play a little bit more careful now. All right. Okay, so that is the Crystal Heart room. It can be a little bit tricky, but there's an easy way through the room if you take damage on the first laser. I was trying to do the damageless cycle there, but managed to dunk into that first laser anyway. Okay, we're going to heal so that we don't die, and then we're going to head on through Crystal Peak. Again, if you're familiar with Hollow Knight speedruns, any percent here would quit out of the game because we're done with what we need in Crystal Peak. But in this run, we are far from done. We actually are going to go and save almost all of the grubs in Crystal Peak, and then we're going to continue on through a dark room to get to Descending Dark, which is the upgraded version of Desolate Dive and will be a pretty major source of damage for us in the later part of this run. Alright, so this is a little crusher cycle here to get the scrub. Like I said, Crystal Peak is pretty consistent, but it is full of cycles, and these rooms are no exception. Even these things here, these Glimbacks can spawn in one of two locations, and you have to be ready to make the faster cycle in either case. Okay, so we made it through there just fine. Next up is the dark room, which, because we didn't pick up the lantern ability, this room is dark, and it leads to the... Oop, saved it. Oop, didn't save it. Messed up where I was. It leads to the Descending Dark ability. So we're going to go through this dark room a couple of times, just so I can show you what it's like. There we go. And then we're going to head on into the Crystallized Mound, which has the Descending Dark ability. This can be a little bit of a tricky area when you're going through it. There's a lot of these Crystal Hunters, which are pretty notorious for being some of the worst enemies in the game. They may even take the mantle from Primal Aspids, which we'll have the luxury of encountering later in this run. But for now, I'm going to hop on up here, and we're going to hope that the Crystal Hunter will actually behave, because there's a fun little skip that I get to do, which is called Buggy Skip. So what I need to do is lure this Crystal Hunter down. Hopefully it'll come. There we go. And it can hit me out of this animation, which is picking up Descending Dark. Because it did that, I'm able to get out of the animation early and leave the room before having to sit through the approximately 10-second cutscene that normally plays there. So that was good to get Buggy Skip. We continue on here to the next major ability, which is Dream Nail. I didn't really talk about the Crystal Heart ability much, but that is what we picked up in Crystal Peak, and it is what you've seen me using quite a bit here, where I'm able to do super dashes across rooms. We're going to use that a ton in this run, mostly just to go fast in places where it's especially speedy. We get a fun little use of it here in the Dream Nail cutscene, which I'll be able to show off in just a second. The Dream Nail ability is something that actually isn't super essential in this run, except for the fact that one of the pale ore is locked behind 300 essence. So we need to kill just enough bosses to reach 300 essence, which is a relatively low number. Sorry, I had to focus for just a second there as I got the underplat, but there is the fun little C dash in the dream sequence. 300 essence is actually just going to be a single boss for us, which is Lostkin. We'll be fighting him significantly later, but typically it's something like 3 different Dream Warriors when you're playing the game casually. It is the only reason that we have to pick up the Dream Nail at all, but we do come back here significantly later in the run for that purpose. I'm opening Resting Ground Stag so that I'll be able to return once I have the essence for the pale ore. But then I'm going to continue on down to here. This is probably my favorite little part of routing in the game. We're going to actually just come down here and save this grub. And then, oh boy, managed to get hit by the bellfly there. After we save that grub and get this money here, we're going to C-dash all the way across Blue Lake, kind of going backwards to Crossroads compared to how typically it's done in speedruns of this game. So again, if you're familiar with any percent or any other speedruns of the game, you may have seen going across Blue Lake from the left to the right. Here we're going to go from the right to the left, and we're coming all the way from Resting Grounds down on over to pick up Shaman's Stone. That's not the only reason that we're down here. In fact, we also need to save Sly and grab one more grub before we leave. Okay, so there's the Shaman's Stone. This will be the only charm that we wear for the rest of the game. It is a very, very useful charm. One of the best charms in the game. It increases your spell damage significantly. So our Fireball right now is dealing 15. Our Descending Dark right now is dealing, I believe, 50. With the Shaman Stone on, the Fireball will be dealing 20 and soon 40 once we get its upgrade. And Descending Dark will be dealing 88 damage. This is all compared to the 9 damage that my nail is dealing, so it's pretty significant. Okay, so you'll notice I quit out there. I haven't actually taken a bench in quite a while. This brings us back to the Dirtmouth bench, which I took right after taking the stag. We're going to stop by Sly and finally use that shopkeeper's key we picked up to purchase the elegant key. And this is going to be our access into the Shade Soul area. So we'll see that in just a second. But yeah, this is basically the damage collection part of the run here. We just need to grab one more upgrade and then we'll be ready to start on our Pale Ore hunting quest, which is quite involved. So we need to come down here and go and fight the second version of the Soul Warrior. There's 2 in the game in this part of the world, and then there's more that appear in the 3rd Colosseum, but we won't be seeing them there. So this was the mini-boss that we found at the beginning of Soul Sanctum. We get to fight them one more time here, only this time they have friends, and I will show you what that looks like. So yeah, we're going to make heavy use of our Descending Dark ability, which we picked up in the Crystallized Mound. It, as I said, is dealing 88 damage to be compared with the 9 damage that our nail is dealing on each swing. So it's pretty significant. However, to get the full 88, I do need to hit all parts of the D-Dark. You can see how quickly the Soul Warrior died there. I didn't even finish talking about it there. But yeah, you do need to hit all parts of the D-Dark, which is a little bit difficult at times. Fun fact for those of you who are familiar with this game casually, D-Dark is honestly one of the best spells in the game. But the part that you need to hit primarily is actually the splash part. The part that goes sideways when you hit the ground. That part deals 50 damage, so even if you're not directly on top of enemies, hitting them with that splash part can be a pretty serious chunk of damage. Anyway, like I mentioned, now that we have our damage, we're ready to go on a pale ore hunting trip. And what that means is we get to save a ton of grubs. So I'm coming down here to go and save some of the crossroads grubs that we didn't quite get to yet. That is this one here, who's right by the entrance near Grubfather. And then there's another one down to the left here, which is by the acid entrance. And you will also see the first of the acid skips that we're going to do in this run. So we're going to save this grub, and then I'll show off this acid skip. This one is pretty easy. It's called the Crossroads Acid Skip. It's found in any percent as well, and it's generally considered the easiest acid skip in the game. But it's still pretty cool. You sit on the wall there, and you do a little C-dash, and then I'm going to drop through this room. And it allows you to skip Isma's tier and still get into Fog Canyon. All right, so we get to save one more grub right here outside of Umu. The best part of the run is right here, where we get to go right past archives and not have to fight Umu. So if you are a lover of the Crossroads Acid Skip, but just hate fighting Umu, this is the category for you. Unfortunately, on the other side of that coin is the boss that we are heading to fight next, which is Nosk. Nosk is probably the worst boss in this run. A little bit of a warning for any arachnophobes out there. This is a spider-based boss who has a lovely little attack where he sits in the ceiling and doesn't really do much of anything for a bit. This attack sucks because we can't deal any damage at all during that phase. So if he does that, then we simply lose time, and if he doesn't, then we're having a wonderful time and a great pace. The only thing good about the Nosk section of this run is that we get to save so many grubs on the way down. Literally, there's 2 grubs in Crossroads, 1 outside Archives, and then another 1 in Fungal, and 2 more in Deep Nest. And all this grub saving brings me the joy that I need to be able to deal with Nosk. All right, so let's head on down. There's a cool little strat here, which I'm going to try to show off, which uses the other aspect of the inventory screen. So at the beginning of this run, I mentioned that you could uncap your fall screen if you open your inventory. One other thing that you can actually do with your inventory on the latest patch of the game is if you open it and you get hit, it will immediately close your inventory, but it will also not give you any knockback. So we use it here to be able to move more quickly through this area. And I'll be using it a few times in Deep Nest in particular in order to take damage without getting any of the usual knockback associated with it. And there's the other aspect of it, which is using your inventory to uncap your fall speed. Okay, so we're just about ready to fight Nosk. I'm going to head on over to the Nosk Arena. It is a hidden wall here, easy to miss. I certainly missed it in my casual playthrough until I had the collector's map, which showed me that grub right there. There's a number of breakable walls along this path, and if we get to the end of it, we get rewarded with the worst boss in the game. Now, I don't quite think it's the worst boss, but I think it is a pretty rough one in this run. All right, so we just have a little bit of a maze to go through here. That was definitely not worth it as a C-dash, for the record. Just a little bit of a maze here. This isn't too bad. It's really the start of the fight that things start to heat up. You'll notice this little version of me running along on the lower paths. This is the trick that Nosk does to lure you in. It's not us, it turns out. Okay, so there's 2 main things about Nosk. One is the ceiling attack, which I was discussing earlier. The other is any time that Nosk is on the ground, typically Nosk will be running back and forth. And what you want to do during those phases is if Nosk stops at all, then you want to use a Descending Dark, and otherwise you want to be shooting a Shade Soul in the direction of Nosk. Okay, that was a perfectly acceptable Nosk. Only one ceiling attack, which we will take. So Descending Dark deals more damage if you can land the entire thing, but you can get double hits with Shade Soul if Nosk is running either away or sometimes even stopped at the very end of his run. So in the end there, pretty good Nosk fight, and we pick up the Pale Ore that we needed. Okay, so we quit back out here. There's one more thing we need in Deep Nest before we can leave, and it is the Tram Pass. So there's the second use of the inventory knockback cancel there. Oops. And there will be another major use of it if I can pull it off in the room after we pick up Tram Pass and start heading down into Basin. All right, there's a fun little jump there. Nice, we got it. That's a little bit tricky to get, but it saves a little bit of time. And there's another grub that we get to save. We continue up through here, and all of this luckily is in the light. It's easy in Deep Nest to have trouble if you haven't picked up the lantern, because if I went too far left on any of these transitions here, we'd actually end up in a dark section. So much like the dark room that I went through earlier, most of Deep Nest is actually in the dark, but the path to Tram Pass is entirely in the light. So we're able to go through this even without lantern without really any issues. Thank goodness that we saved the grub there, by the way. That spike grub makes this upper path to Tram actually faster. Otherwise, we'd have to go through the dark room to save a few seconds, which is not exactly what we want to be doing. Okay, so there's the Tram Pass. This is going to be our next major movement ability, if we can call it that. It's not something we can do, but something we can use. So this will allow us to use the tram, which is at the lower part of the map, to quickly get to the Ancient Basin and to pick up our final movement ability, which is the Monarch Wings. All right, so this is the next area where I'm going to attempt to use... Yeah, okay. So I got the first knockback cancel, which is good, but I missed the cycle at the end, which is unfortunate. Okay, anyway, here we're using the Tram Pass. Luckily, we take this bench either way, so I get a full heal, even if I take a couple of hits. All right, so we're going to sit on this bench and head down and pick up the Monarch Wings. So this is the next boss fight of the run, and also a bit of a slog of an area. So the area here is filled with an enemy called Maulurks, and they shoot in not quite random, but also random patterns. So there are consistent methods to avoid getting hit to these Maulurks, but sometimes they don't quite work as intended, and there are a couple that are completely random. So that's the first one. You can jump over it, but you have to jump at a particular time. The second one here is also consistent. The third one, that one would have been consistent if I didn't mess it up. This one is random, but we got lucky, and then this one can be a little bit random. This last one, even though I know for a fact that it's possible to avoid getting hit consistently, I just pray every time, and it works pretty well. All right, so here is a fun little trick called a trans dash. I won't be explaining it at all because we got it first try. Usually I sit there for 30 minutes trying to talk about it because I miss it 1,000 times. Now, it only saves a couple of seconds, but the basic tech is when you dash into a wall and jump immediately, then instead of going upward, your dash actually goes more to the side, and it allows us to jump up to where we wouldn't otherwise get with just claw and dash. All right, so that was Broken Vessel. I was still explaining the trans dash when we killed him because it's a very, very quick fight. This is really not too bad, but luckily for us, we get to face the harder version of that fight immediately. So we're going to pick up Monarch Wings here. It's our last ability. And then we're going to head back in and go for Broken Vessel. Go for Lostkin. Lostkin is the upgraded version of Broken Vessel, and it's where we're getting all of the essence we need in this run. There were earlier versions of this route that actually got our essence in other ways, killing just a couple of Dream Warriors or going and fighting Failed Champion. This is the version that we landed on, mostly because it also gets us Monarch Wings, and Monarch Wings is extremely nice to have. So, we're going to be fighting this boss here. This boss can be very tricky in a casual playthrough. We don't have a ton of upgrades, but luckily for us, there is actually a stun lock of sorts that we are going to try to hit. So it doesn't quite literally stun lock, but if you pogo and D-Dark, then it only takes 3 more hits to get Lostkin staggered again. And we're going to be taking advantage of that to keep Lostkin staggered as much as possible. As you can see, Lostkin summons all these additional friends throughout the fight. Okay, good. We actually wanted to keep one alive because we actually want to intentionally die here at the end of the fight in order to more quickly warp out of the fight. If we don't die, it takes about an additional 5 seconds to wait for us to get warped out. But if we die, we get warped out, but it still counts the kill. So that was a pretty fine Lostkin fight. Nothing too fantastic, but we were able to show the stun lock pretty decently. And as you can see, we got 400 essence from that. That 400 essence is going to be enough for the rest of the run, so we don't need to worry about essence anymore. All right, so we're just going to save one more grub before we quit back out. We have one more thing to do in Basin before we head on in to Kingdom's Edge. So there is a Pale Ore down here. Again, the main point of this run is to pick up all of the Pale Ore if we can. And this is the, I believe just the second that we're picking up, actually. We picked up the Nosk Ore, but we didn't pick up the Crystal Peak one yet. So this is only the second of the Pale Ore that we're getting. Along the way, we get to save a grub. Again, having the dive ability allowed us to save that grub. That's one more reason why dive is very nice in this run, not to mention the damage bonus. Okay, this arena is pretty simple, and we pick up the Pale Ore and save and quit. Okay. So from here, we are going to actually be heading up into Kingdom's Edge and into the Colosseum of Fools. So we head directly there. This can be a bit of a tricky segment. There's quite a bit of stuff that happens here, and it's very easy to take a couple of hits of damage. But luckily, there is ample time to stop and hit enemies for soul and take a couple of heals if you really need it. Okay. So we start with climbing up this room. Luckily, we don't have to enter the Hive. The Hive is notorious for being one of the most difficult places to go through. There is a grub in the Hive that sadly we won't be saving in this run, but we will be getting a couple of other grubs that are in Lower Kingdom's Edge before we're ready to go. So we're going to be saving this grub. Okay, good. I had to hope that horn wouldn't activate. And then we're going to go get another grub, which is over here. This we call the Hive External grub. It is technically a room in the Hive, but it's not connected to the Hive. And to get there, we have to do that cute little acid skip. That's a different variant of acid skip than what you've seen in the Crossroads acid skip. That one actually is also possible with a crystal dash, but it's significantly harder. It is easier to use a fireball to stall in the air long enough to be able to dash again. And we do that both in and out. All right, so now we're going to head down through Kingdom's Edge. We're going to get one more grub along the way, which is the Spike Grub, which is up around here. So we've got a few rooms to go through. Nothing too crazy here, just basic movement. This is a pretty good spot to pause if needed. But yeah, we can head up here, save one more grub, and then we head on into Colo proper. So this grub is behind this hidden wall. We go and save it, and then we head back on up. So fun fact about this segment, if you try to come up this area through this side, so you can actually do an acid skip here to skip this pool. If you do that, it's a little bit faster to get to the grub, but for some reason, if you do that, then it doesn't update the flag that causes Hornet to appear in the City of Tears, and you have to sit through a cutscene later. If you go the lower route, for some reason it does update that flag, and you don't have to sit through that cutscene. I honestly could not tell you why on earth that happened, but what I can tell you is that after actually getting the acid skip, I found out the hard way that it still loses time. Alright, so we're going to head on into Colo. This is honestly a pretty exciting part of the run. This right here is a series of fights that are mostly common enemies. There's a lot of enemies specific to Colos, but we do see our good old friend, the Primal Aspid, in here. But then at the end, there are a couple of new bosses. So at the first, we'll fight the Grezmother twice. We actually haven't fought Grezmother in this run, so this will be the first time we're seeing that boss. That's at the end of the first one. At the end of the second, we'll fight the much worse boss, the Oblobbles. So anyway, we are going to do Colo 1, and we're going to hopefully show off some of the fun strats that you can do with Descending Dark. So a big part of these early Colos, when you don't have a lot of damage, then most of what you want to do in Colo is time your spells correctly and manage your soul. So it's a little bit tricky to get right because I only get 3 casts of soul, and pretty much all of these enemies don't die very easily to nail swings. I need to use my spells, which are upgraded and deal significantly more damage. So like Shade Soul here is dealing 40 damage. Descending Dark is dealing 88. It is pretty massive. So most of what we need to do comes down to soul management, trying to make sure that I have enough soul to cast these spells, and also still efficiently kill each of the waves of enemies that we've been fighting. So this all is a good example. You can see I have mixed my spell usage with some... Oops, missed my nail swing. With some nail attacks in order to more efficiently kill some of these enemies. We're making pretty good time through this Colo so far. We'll see if we can continue that. You can see these dream nails that I'm trying to do. It's easy to... It's easy to miss some of them because, unfortunately, the timing is a little bit before... Oops. A little bit before their cage pops up for perfect timing on these. So it can be a little tricky, but we're getting it for the most part. Okay. So this is the last few waves of Colo. We have a couple of waves of these Grezzers, which can be a little bit tricky, and then 2 Grezmothers, who we haven't actually seen yet in this run. These die in 3 Shade Souls and 3 hits each. So they can be pretty quick fights if you are building your soul usage correctly. All right, so that's Colo 1. That is the easier half of things. We have the second Colosseum now to deal with. Colo 1 drops a Charm Notch, which is basically useless to us in this run, but it does give us the benefit of a full heal at the end, which is very nice. Also, speaking of very nice, my geo count right now is very nice. We're going to head into Colo 2, though. Colo 2 is the actual prize of this run. This is the Colosseum that has the pale ore that we so desire. I timed it correctly, but I was a little too far away. Okay, so Colo 2 is a lot trickier than the previous Colo that we were dealing with, so we'll be having to focus up just a little bit more for this. Once again, basically everything is about the soul management, and we really just want to make sure that we are keeping track of how much soul we're spending and setting ourselves up to kill certain enemies very quickly using casts of soul. So you can see there, it can be very fast to kill some of these enemies. Oops. If you have set up properly with the amount of soul that you have and that you need, but it can be pretty slow if you don't. Okay. These bellflies are actually pretty scary. If you get hit by them, then you take double damage, so it's a little bit tricky to make sure that you're not being hit. But they're luckily not too bad. Here I'm just waiting for all the hoppers and then trying to kill as many as I can at once. These are great hoppers. They're a little bit tricky if you are seeing them for the first time, but luckily it's pretty easy to figure out the damage rotations with the nail upgrade that we have. And as you can see, I have now depleted my soul. So we're going to take a second here. This would be a great grub to pick up in a run that needs 31 of them, but unfortunately it's a mimic, so we've been baited. Alright, so here's a fun little segment of Colo. Where we get a handful of enemies. Nice. And then it leads into one of the scarier pieces, which is called the floorless section. So I will show you how that looks here, but basically spikes appear on the ground, and so we have to stay along the walls. Oops. Missed my nails from there. Alright, so that was the floorless section. It's pretty easy in Colo 2. In Colo 3, it gets pretty difficult. Alright. And here we have the last few waves before the real problem waves, which are the obbles. So these are the most annoying enemies in Colo 2. They're pretty random and they have a ton of health. So we're going to be fighting these for a little while. They take 4 nail swings and a shade soul, or 2 shade souls or 8 nail swings. The 4 nail swings and the shade soul are basically equivalent. So we're going to be using a lot of shade souls. Sometimes you can get them into the spikes. Hey, that was pretty good. And they can cooperate. Other times they don't cooperate at all. Okay, that was pretty good. Alright, and here is the next unique boss of the Colosseums. These are called the Oblobbles, and they can be a bit of a tricky boss. They're effectively a bullet hell boss. They do shoot out in consistent patterns, so if you are used to the fight, then it can be okay. Hey, we got a lucky essence drop from that Oblobble. We will take that. Okay, so that was actually a pretty good Colo 2. Everything went relatively smoothly there, and we will take our pale ore and be on our way, friends. Okay, so now we get to continue down to King's Station, where we're going to once again save a couple of grubs and then be on our way for the cleanup of the run. So we're almost done. This is basically the end. This inventory drop is pretty important. It's pretty far, so it saves a lot of time. But yeah, we're nearing the end here. There's a few more things we have to do. Mostly it is cleanup in terms of a couple of grubs we need to save and a couple of pale ores we have to pick up. So first of all, we're going to come here and open the stag. This is going to be our way out of here in a second. Fun little fact there, you can shoot a fireball to open the stag, or to call the stag, which will save us a little bit of time later. Okay, and then we're going to go save this grub. This grub is guarded here by this great husk sentry. This great husk sentry can be a little bit of a pain, but behaved well enough there. And then we're going to come over here and save one more grub, which is underneath the Tower of Love over here. This is a little secret entrance you might have missed if you played this game, but there's actually a passageway here and a grub back here. All right, and with that, we can quit out and go and pick up our Seer Pale Ore. So this is, again, just a bit of cleanup here. We're just going to be taking stags various places and getting everything we need. Okay. I haven't talked about the language at all. We play in Chinese in this game because the text is significantly faster that way. It does mean that for stags, we need to know where the stag locations are or speak Chinese. I do not speak Chinese, so I have to simply learn where the stag locations are. But yeah, we come back here, talk to Sierra a few times. If you remember, we got this essence from the Lost Kin earlier, and now we're trading it in for the Pale Ore, which should be there, and now we're on our way. So just a few more things to do. We have about 3 more grubs to save, if my count is correct, maybe 4. Yeah, 4 more grubs to save, I think. The first 2 of them are going to be in Greenpath. All right, so we're going to take a bench here. This is just to quit out to in a second when we need to get out of here. Okay, so we're heading down. This is a bit of movement, which you're going to see again, friends, because at the end of this run, we're actually going to be coming right back down to here. And I will explain that decision as we're doing it later. But yeah, this is just a little bit of fun movement. You get to see quite a pretty fun use of the Crystal Dash ability. There's a fun section of places where you can just do these C dashes like all the way across rooms, and I love that we're able to showcase a few of them in this. Like this right here. Look at this. Come on. Who doesn't love that? Oh, I don't love that, let me tell you. So yeah, this is the first of the grubs. There's one more grub we're going to save in Greenpath before we leave. And that is the one up here by Cornifer. So typically you would be here in the first time through Greenpath, but the skip that we did, the first fireball skip, actually skipped all of that. So instead we only come through here with full movement later, which is significantly faster. Okay. So now we're going to go to Dirtmouth. This is the last bit of cleanup we need. I'm going to go back into Crystal Peak, and we're going to do yet one more skip here, which will allow us to enter Crystal Peak once more through the elevator entrance. Now, if you've played this game a little bit, you may know about the elevator entrance, but you may not realize how you can get up there without actually opening it earlier. That's what I'm going to show you here. If you climb up to King's Pass and you C-dash across, then you can actually end your C-dash and use wings to climb back up onto the elevator. Just like that. And this actually allows you to skip ever opening this elevator and instead just come over here very late in the game. It is our way back into Crystal Peak where we have 2 more grubs to save and 1 more Pale Ore to pick up. Oops, missed that. That's fine. This bit of movement is pretty fun. Crystal Peak, again, it's a pretty enjoyable area. There's a lot of things that can go wrong, but there's also a lot of really, really fun movement once you learn the cycles appropriately. Here again, a handful of fun C-dashes. These are pretty much intended. I mean, not the ones that cling on walls exactly, but this is a bit of a C-dash tutorial area. The game expects you to come here after picking up the Crystal Heart ability and learning how to use C-dash while you're at it. All right, that was a bit of intentional damage we took so we'd be able to pick up the pale ore, or not pale ore, the king's idol. We're going to be using that for financing for nail upgrades at the very end. All right, so one last bit of movement. We are going to head up to the Hallownest crown. This is a bit of a tricky area, but once again, there's a really fun sea dash. Actually, hold on, sorry. I think I was a bit low. Let me fix that. There we go. A really fun sea dash that goes all the way across this room like that and saves you an absolute ton of time. Here, this is why I picked up a little bit of soul earlier. Once Shade Soul, we'll get rid of all of them. We can save this grub and get on out. All right, and then we have the last bit of the run here, which is picking up this crown ore. This is the last sort of major movement of the run. There's a little bit more that we have to do later, but I will talk about that when we get there. This is probably the last truly scary part. A lot can go wrong on this climb if you're not too careful, but luckily once you've got the movement consistent, it's not too bad. These are a couple of fun little pogos you can do to skip most of that room, and then we've made it to the very top. This is Hallownest Crown. That is the 5th pale ore, and we only need one more, and that is going to be from the Grubfather. Okay, so the Grubfather, like I said, throughout this run, we needed to save 31 grubs. We have hopefully saved all of them, and I will be able to come on down here and pick up our reward from Grubfather. This route saves, of course, exactly 31 grubs. There are a number of grubs which are kind of, bit of bad RNG there, but no big deal. There's a number of grubs that are also pretty quick to get, but we don't end up getting in this run just because they were slightly slower than some of the grubs we did get, but these 31 are pretty quick. And we get the joy of all of these little grubbies being so happy. Look how happy they are. All right, so this is just a bit of waiting. We just sit through this entire segment. Grubfather showers us with praise and with money, and we wait for the reward for the 31st grub to drop. It takes quite a while. Unfortunately, there's no way to skip this. We were hoping that, if you could leave the room and come back or something, everything would spawn, but no, we just have to sit through it. Fun fact about this used to be a pretty nice thing in the full completion category, 112%. We would sit through this entire cutscene with all 46 grubs, which was very, very long, about a minute and a half, long enough for us to actually go and take a bathroom break. Unfortunately, more recent reroutes have actually made us visit Grubfather 2 separate times, and instead of having one nice long break at the very end of the run where we get a minute and a half or so to take a short break, we instead have to deal with about a minute break instead, which is not enough to use the bathroom if you ask me. Anyway, there's the Grubfather Pale Ore. We are going to now head and finally pick up Nail 4. So going on in here. This is pretty much the end of the run here. This is the final prerequisite step before we can get the happy couple. So we're going to head on over back to the Nailsmith who we talked to so long ago. And we are going to pass by Lem on the way. So yeah, there's a bit of extra geo that we need to collect, but there's a lot of fun sea dashes that we get to show off too. So it's pretty fun. Alright, and we are going to come along here. This is where you would get the Hornet fountain cutscene if you did not go through the proper rooms in Kingdom's Edge earlier. So for some reason, you'll get that cutscene if you take the upper path, but not the lower path. Okay, so we're just getting our last bit of geo here. We don't actually need to sell that third relic. It's handed to us for free by the Grubfather, but we actually don't need it. I only need 6,900 geo here, and we have 7,750, so we're actually completely fine. Okay, so we're gonna head up and head on over. You can see this is significantly faster if you remember the beginning of the run where I had to come here with just claw and dash. We had to go all the way around the room. With C dash, you can actually skip up to that and just C dash across, which is much nicer. All right, so we're getting our last nail upgrades all at once here. It would have been nice to have them for Colo 2, but unfortunately it's just a little too out of the way to come here later, which is why I picked up the nail 1 upgrade so early. But on the bright side, we have exactly what we need. So when you finish getting all the nail upgrades, the Nailsmith will talk to you and say he needs to step outside for some air. If you step outside, you'll see that he's here. If you talk to him, he'll actually ask that you use your newfound blade. He wants to feel what it's like to be struck by the pure nail. That is what we call the bad ending. Instead, we are going to go and see what awaits if you don't kill the Nailsmith. If we instead head to Greenpath, and like I said, this is one more reason why we picked up the Greenpath stag early in the run. If we head down here, we can actually go and visit the lovely Nailmaster Sheo in his hut. And friends, there is a fun Easter egg waiting for you there. Okay, so to get there, we have to go through one little bit of platforming, which has been dubbed the Greenpath of Pain in some circles. It is a thorn gauntlet with all of these Durandas in the way. Once you know how to move through it, it's not too bad, but it's definitely a bit tricky when you're playing casually. I'm going to try to do a... Oh, wow. That's a very hard trick. That is very precise. I'm very glad that I got that thorn jump. I was expecting to say that we missed it because we always miss it, but instead we got it. Let's go. Okay, so we have to talk to Sheo and pick up the Great Slash ability before we can continue. Now that we've done that, I can head outside and take a seat on this bench. Now we head back in, friends. And we see the greatest scene in all of Hollow Knight. The Nailsmith has come to Sheo's hut and found his true love. This is adorable. It results in an achievement called the Happy Couple, and that is time. This is honestly one of the coolest little scenes to showcase, and one of my favorite pieces of this game in general. So yeah. That was it. That was Happy Couple. I hope you all enjoyed.